I'm Mahtab Uddin. I'm actually Chief Coordinator of Center for Law, Sustainability and Peace, Bangladesh. Today, we have one keynote speaker, who is Mr. Dr. Awal Khan, Professor, Department of Law, Independent University of Bangladesh. And also we have discussant, Mr. Samsuddoha, who is actually Executive Director of Center for Participatory Development. Is it like CPRD, actually, Center for Participatory Research and Development, CPRD. We had another actually speaker, but unfortunately, he had some issues, so he said he cannot join today. But anyway, we'll continue. So before before going into keynote speaker's speech, I will give some short overview of what we are talking about today, about the topic and some glimpse of international and national issues. I would like to make you all aware that our keynote speaker's presentation will be recorded. And after keynote speaker's presentation, I will give floor to Mr. Samsuddoha for his discussion, and also the listeners and audience will also be given floor for their question. I would like to start with some basic concept. Like, we have two issues today: environmental justice and climate justice. Basically, we have climate justice and human rights issues. But before that, we need to also tell a little bit about environmental justice. Environmental justice actually is something which focuses on unequal distribution of environmental burdens and benefits among different social groups, particularly like marginalized and low-income communities. And it deals with issues such as like siting of polluting facilities like landfills, industrial plants, etc., exposure to environmental hazards, access to clean air and water, and right to a healthy environment overall. And most importantly, on environmental justice, we need to make sure that people in general or citizens have access or participation in decision making. On the other hand, on climate justice, we see we demand for, or we need to address, or we need to make sure that the impacts and responsibilities and liabilities induced from climate change should be proportionally distributed among all group of people of a society, from marginalized to rich people. Like, they should take their responsibility proportionately. Since climate change is a global issue, so when we tell about climate justice, it's not only about, we don't think about only national context, we want to think about international context. And since the reason behind climate change doesn't go or is not bestowed to only one country or two countries or only few countries, it goes to mainly industrialized countries or those countries which play a significant role in greenhouse gas emission in the atmosphere. So at international level, we see climate justice tells us to take responsibility according to their role or contribution in climate change or greenhouse gas emission in atmosphere. And based on that, we have an idea that developed countries or industrialized countries today, they will help or cooperate or collaborate those countries which are not capable enough on their own to deal with climate change issues. And based on these facts and philosophy, international climate regime adopted a principle which is called principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, CBDR, which tells that countries which played more role or which had more role in climate change will take more responsibility. And at the same time, countries which have more capacity or capability to deal with climate change, they will cooperate other countries all over the world, or they will build cooperation with other countries to combat climate change. So in a sense, environmental justice, while is more focused into national level, climate justice is not only focused on national level, but also it is focused on international uh, level and international stakeholders, diverse stakeholders, including states. And based on these things, we find that international climate regime, which is premised on United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, concluded in 1992, we find that there are some few basic tools have been adopted to deal with climate change, which we see or we name as adaptation, mitigation, technology transfer, capacity building, climate finance or financial cooperation. And finally, we have adopted loss and damage. So for today's discussion, in addition to first 5 tools, loss and damage is also a very important tool, and which has actually recently been adopted or actually recently been adopted formally by Paris Agreement. And when we found Paris Rulebook has been laid down or adopted, we find so many provisions and so many agreement and modus operandi has been adopted how to implement this loss and damage tool of battling or combating climate change. Since now I come to the context of Bangladesh, or in the context of Bangladesh, we feel like that since Bangladesh is one of the most climate change affected countries of the world, and we need a lot of cooperation from other countries to battle or to combat climate change, loss and damage is one of the most important tools we should use or we can use in our national fight or national battle against climate change. Apart from loss and damage, we are already in Bangladesh is already to some extent is in forefront in climate change adaptation, but we are not too much into mitigation yet. We need a lot of cooperation for technology transfer, for technological base, and we need technology transfer from other countries. Technology transfer means those technologies which are essential for battling climate change, meaning which are essential for mitigation and also for adaptation. We also need financial cooperation from developed countries or international community, since we are not categorized as OECD country or Annex 1 or Annex 2 country as per United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So under this background or under this scenario, so while we see climate justice should be addressed from international level, and we find that the result of climate justice should also be reached to the poor community or marginalized community at national level, I mean within Bangladesh. At that context, or for that, we need national policy, national laws, and national strategies which can make sure that most marginalized people or most affected people are properly addressed and duly respected by national laws and policies. I must mention that since climate justice is a matter of addressing people's need, which are most affected by climate change, human rights is a very important tool or component of addressing climate justice. And from that context, human rights mean actually it's not only right to live or right to having access to food or access to housing. It also includes right to have access to a sound and viable environment, which is essential for living. So based on this, while both environmental justice and climate justice is important for us, our first keynote is actually our only keynote speakers today. And now I will invite Professor Awal Khan to tell us about climate justice and human rights. And his topic is titled as Establishing Justice in the Climate Legacy of Bangladesh and Evaluation. Welcome, Professor Awal Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Madhavuddin, for your comprehensive introductory remarks. Let me share my screen. I have prepared a draft on the given topic. As you understand that it is still in this is my first draft, so still many things to be addressed. So I seek your valuable comments that might be beneficial for the improvement. Yeah. So probably my skin has been shared. Okay. Yeah. The title of my presentation is Climate Justice in the Climate Legacy of Bangladesh. So as you understand that climate justice is very concept. Could be there are few challenges and issues that need to be addressed in the legal regime or policy regime of Bangladesh. That is my basic focus. And there are what are the major challenges that need to be addressed to overcome these challenges. And all we are aware that climate change is we have too many adverse impact of climate change on our life and livelihoods, including our human rights. And it is no longer a issue that we remain keep it as our second priority or something. Rather, we need to consider these issues as at all levels of the government or all level of the policy level that it should be given a priority. And you know that the climate justice, it includes there are few issues that you need to focus. That is vulnerable group. They are the always we talk about the vulnerable people or something. So they are the first priority that we need to consider. And also we need to overall environmental issues or environmental sustainability is also required to ensure climate justice. I'll explain what is actually general concept that we adopt through our policy level that is called as climate justice. But we need to uh, understand that different environmental governance as well. And the concept of climate justice, and if it is not properly protected, then it might be injustice. And it is not actually too much popularized or policy level focused issues. Rather, it is the issues that we need to, still we are doing different academic and uh, policy level exercise to how do we adapt these climate justice issues in both in theory and practice. And we Bangladesh so far policy that we already addressed or developed, despite its significant normative development, climate justice or climate change issues remains inadequate in that sense that uh, reality and theoretical framework is not the same. So normative gap always remained in terms of climate justice and particularly in terms of human rights-based approach, it remains one of the major challenges. My focus on these papers will primarily focus on the basic literature to understand that systematic development of climate justice and also the protection regime uh, that future present and future generation in Bangladesh that we need to address, and also major policy intervention in regard to climate change, and there are few shortcomings. So if we just look into the theoretical framework of climate justice, that we can see that climate justice matters have been both national and international jurisdictions. It's already an emerging issue. And there are, however, the very concept and practice remain inadequate, as I mentioned there earlier, that because due to systematic legal inclusion or systematic formation of legislation, and there is also different gaps that actually what kind of universally accepted definition and its application could be framed, and also framed both internationally. And climate justice for the group of, I mean, the establishing justice for the groups of people under legal and policy regime, as well as setting up international platform remain one of the major challenges for the developing countries like Bangladesh. So human rights and climate justice is an internationally emerging issue and received uh, less attention in for the developing country context because the developing countries, as Dr. Mathur mentioned, that there are few issues still they need to improve, such as technological improvement as well as different financial shortcomings. So there are also systematic literature is still lacks. While I was searching or preparing this draft, then I could not find any more authentic, or what should I say, that the resources as I was looking for, that was not actually available because I realized that there are also academic gaps as well in that particular issues. So there are also legal and policy, I mean, substantive and procedural legal frameworks is also lacking, particularly focusing on climate justice. So the objective of this study is, here I would like to mention that the unprecedented global problem climate change creates multiple cross-cutting issues which directly have implications not only on environment but also social and economic sectors. Therefore, climate change not only profoundly affects the environment and environmental security but human rights. So, as the previous speaker mentioned, that the vulnerable groups like physically challenged and financially or marginalized people, they face the vulnerability most. So the aim of this study is to determine the nature and features of the climate justice and also how climate justice has been addressed so far in the existing policy level of Bangladesh. So to this end, there are few questions that actually I need to look into. That means how far climate justice have been ensured in the climate legacy of Bangladesh, and also what are the major challenges to establishing climate justice in Bangladesh, and what are the challenges to be introduced to overcome the what changes are to be introduced to overcome those challenges. Methodology basically doctrinal, but subject to availability of funding, some field study could be undertaken. And there are few key informant interview is targeted by which that climate, particularly both academic and policy level, to understand the theoretical framework of climate justice. Um, and also to understand the climate justice, we need some background issues that we need to actually consider. That is uh, justice. What do you mean actually justice? So both in legal point of view, and they actually followed a similar approach in defining both law and justice. So justice is a broad term and law is a particularly narrow, but to ensure justice, legal mechanism is required. And here, the justice, what mean justice, it includes fairness and different ethical issues. And justice is considered as the central values of any social order and the most comprehensive aspect of people. So, in determining the nation's positions in political civilization depends on the degree in which justice is defined by the law, is realized in its judicial administration. So, if you want to ensure justice, then we need to have some mechanism by which justice could be ensured. And there is no better test of excellence of the government than the efficiency of judicial system. Because so once we talk about justice, then there must have some mechanism, and judiciary is considered as one of the best administration by which justice could be ensured. And also there are administration of justice in the firmest pillar of the government, and which is the integrated part of sovereignty. But classically, justice was counted as one of the fundamental virtues of social institution in modern times. So, uh, if you talk about environmental justice or climate justice, then first you need to understand or prepare the administrative and judicial framework by which this kind of institutional arrangement could be made. Well, then before entering into the climate justice, then we need to focus on environmental justice as well. And the regime or the dimension of environmental justice in Bangladesh is, I would say that is now um, is or more organized than previous times. And the environmental justice basically meant as the fair treatment, protection, and promotion of environmental issues against any adverse environmental pollution and hazard. Although the environmental issues in Bangladesh has not been too much protected in terms of particularly air pollution, water pollution still remain one of the major challenges. But still, the environmental advocacy group they frequently raise their voice. So by which a culture already developed in Bangladesh countries and environmental justice, and also later part of this presentation I'll mention the public inter litigation is also on the kind of major tools by which environmental justice in Bangladesh is systematically uh, protected through judiciary. And the concept of environmental justice actually remains the recognition of disparities among people in cost and benefit distribution. That is meaning that the concept is in fact called for equality. As we the generic term of justice, we mentioned that equality or equity that should be the core issues of environmental justice. And environmental justice embrace social justice as well, and it means that all human beings are equal and should be treated equally. And actually, environmental justice not only embrace human beings but also flora and fauna is also the part of environmental justice. So social, moreover, the environmental justice injustice generally occurs when a social group bears a disproportionate burden of the cost of industrialization in a comparison to a wider population, and that group should be better off without industrializations. However, environmentalism is a political and ethical movement that seeks to improve and protect the quality of the natural environment through a changes to environmental harmful human activities. So if we see this scenario, then we can understand that environmental justice matters remains a uh, long journey to be uh, crossed. That systematically under the legal arrangement, environmental justice could be arranged. And environmental justice in Bangladesh context, as we see that legal arrangement, that means judiciary, as I mentioned earlier, that judiciary played a vital role, as well as recent amendment of Bangladesh Constitution, Article 18A, where the fundamental principle of state policy, environmental protection, and improvement of biodiversity issues are mentioned here. And also, if we protection of public property, including rivers, water bodies, is also constitutional duties of the citizen and public servant under Article 21, and also public the improving of the status of public health is one of the primary duties as per our constitution, and also cultural standard, living standard of the people, right to life. In broader terms, I mean the right to life and liberty. If we consider environmental issues that are connected with right to life, so that's why protection of right to life and personal liberty is also uh, under the coverage of environmental justice. So as well as the safe and pollution-free environment, we aspire for a environment that is right to many countries in the developed countries. They advocacy for healthy environment, but in Bangladesh context, we struggle for a safe environment. So it remains one of the challenges for the country where regulatory framework remains weaker in terms of implementation. And the Supreme Court of Bangladesh recently has interpreted right to life in a healthy environment two prominent cases. Here you can see this citation of this case. And the Supreme Court has provided verdict that Department of Environment bear the primary responsibility to ensure pollution-free environment for its citizens. But if their uh, failure to ensure that kind of pollution-free environment, that there should be a accountability mechanism so that we can at least bring the polluter before the judiciary or any competent authority to clarify that how far uh, environmental protection should remain uh, under this status. So, and the department, the Department of Environment, it bears the primary responsibility for all kind of environmental protection as well as climate change, and that's why they bears under the the primary responsibility belongs to them under the Ministry of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So, government Bangladesh has enacted, that the recent um, law that we already have, that Environmental Conservation Act 1995, which is actually one of the comprehensive legal framework by which all kinds of environmental issues are uh, covered, and it overlaps actually the previous legislations by which a particular pollution related issues were actually mentioned in different legislation. But after formation of this Environmental Conservation Act, more comprehensive provisions are actually enacted. But from 1995 to 2024, not too much improvement we observed in the uh, overall environmental scenario. So that's why the legal implications and its enforcement mechanism remains one of the questions. I'm not going to discuss all these things at the moment, but let me jump into the other. There are a few definitions, a few provisions of Environmental Conservation Act I mentioned here. And if we see that another legislation by which Environmental Code Act, here you can see that offenses relating to environmental pollution and matters are actually tried by this environmental code. And we have another legislation, Bangladesh Biodiversity Act, by which uh, enacted this legislation was enacted for conservation and sustainable use of its resources. And another policy document that I'd like to mention, that is National Policy 2018, and also Bangladesh Water Act, Bangladesh Mobile Code Act 2009, by which actually different environmental hazards or violation could be uh, could be addressed immediately. And most importantly, Bangladesh Water Act, it actually says about not only the water um, conservations, but also water systematic water governance issues are also mentioned in the Water Act. And there are National Water Policy, Water Management Plan 2004, National River Protection 2013. There are so many policy issues that we already have, but then we need to actually all these policy document that focus different aspect of environmental issues. Then in terms of implementation, that I'd like to mention that under the Local Government or City Corporation Act 2009, Local Government Purishaba Act or Indian Purishad Act, waste management matters are dealt in locally, and improper waste management will be amount to a public nuisance under 268 of the Bangladesh Penal Code, and it is considered as a punishable offense. And also Section 277 of Penal Code states that whoever voluntarily corrupt or fouls the water of any public spraying or reservoir shall be punished under the imprisonment, either prescription for a term which may extend to 3 months or fine may be extended to 500 taka or something. So all these legal arrangements are basically we have for the overall environmental protections, and but we see very less implementation in terms of strict implementation is still lacking. So let me discuss on the public interest litigation by which environmental issues are uh, protected. Here we can see that judiciary plays a vital role for environmental issues. And there is a popular case, we are all aware about this flood action plan case. It was in 1997 case of where it is said that Appellate Division of Bangladesh Supreme Court commented that aggrieved person not need to suffer directly a violation of fundamental rights affecting particularly the vulnerable people or group involving public wrong or public injury. Any member of the public organization, whether being a sufferer or not, becomes a person aggrieved, and it is the realization of any of the objective purpose of the Constitution. So after this landmark case, uh, any issues actually under the environmental violation or any people could be treated as an active person and then can bring the matter before the court for implementation. There are a few other cases by which industrial pollution and different environmental protection matters are actually protected under our present legal arrangement. But if we consider the climate justice, which is now is a broader term, that means climate justice connects both human rights, particularly protecting rights of the most vulnerable group of people and sharing the burdens and benefits of climate change and its decision equitably and fairly. This very concept is commonly well accepted concept, and climate justice means to comply with the rights of the standards already we agreed, and when fundamental human rights treaties were adopted or ratified upon the climate impacts imply more far-reaching and costly implementation obligation than expected. And climate justice is informed by the science and response to science and acknowledge the need for equitable taking care and distribution of the world resources. That is the most challenging part by which climate justice actually uh, globally uh, how the climate justice issues are globally addressed. And although there are no universally agreed definition and principles, and there are climate justice issues. Actually, it varies from country to country, and sometimes in international platform, climate justice issues are uh, edited or rephrased according to uh, according to the demand or the social or economic status of that particular uh, society or country as well. And Mary Robinson Foundation few principles of climate justice such as the respect and protect human rights, support the right of the development, share benefits and burdens equitably, ensure that decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable. So, and also, of course, the gender equality and equity. These are the major criteria by which I would rather say these are the principles that need to be incorporated in or at all policy levels of climate change. And the another challenge is the right-based approach to climate change. That means if we right-based approach, that means um, that climate change related issues can be claimed as a right, either through their legal mechanism or through any policy intervention. So in 2015, um, Paris Agreement here it says that when taking action to address climate change, respect, promote, and consider their irrespective obligation on human rights, the right to health, the right of indigenous people, local communities, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, and people with vulnerable situation, and the right to development as well as gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity. So this is actually the definition of the concept through the Paris Agreement. They adopted is covered almost on all areas of climate justice. The movement of climate justice also played significant role shaping the United Nations framework of climate change and its Kyoto Protocol, and also the Paris Agreement. So climate justice issues, if I go back to the major criteria, then you can see that respect and protect of human rights is a too broad to actually ensure that what kind of human rights issues are directly affected by climate change. And also a right to development is also a broader term. That means the people or the vulnerable group, those who are directly affected by climate change, then what are the challenges they can claim climate the development, as well as the share benefits and burdens equitably. This is globally, these issues are actually um, more it is one of the gray area. You did say that how the burdens and benefit could be shared through globally, and also ensure the decision of climate change are participatory and transparent, accountable. And this is also for the developing country context, decision participation. That means in decision making process by the affected people or the vulnerable group to remain one of the challenges or to be incorporated to the policy document. So now climate change and human rights issues, as from my previous discussion or previous talk, you already received an idea that climate change is uh, no longer any environmental or natural issues, rather human rights issues are directly affected. And human rights mechanism in a particular country, they um, um, that means what sort of human rights institution available in a particular country, they need there is a time to take the mandate that how human rights issues could be um, properly protected. And if I mention that human rights approach to climate change is preferred because human rights health based climate change is the most widely shared set of international laws and obligation and values. That means if we call something as a human rights, then we need to identify that what sort of international laws and obligation and values are there already available there, and how those and standards could be um, maintained, particularly in developing countries like Bangladesh. And climate and human rights is also human rights to attention to the effect of climate in particular uh, communities, as I already mentioned, that vulnerability of the people and as well as their responses from state with the responsibility and capacity to act. That means here the state bears the most liability, especially financial burden is also here uh, important. And climate change are international cooperation. Climate response to climate change and human rights is no longer a national matter, rather uh, joint collaboration and international cooperation from the state is crucial. The protection of human rights and climate depends on the multilateral action of the international community, where human rights are violated by adversely to climate change. So, um, international community should come into a single platform by which each and every issues of climate change in a particular country they can face combinedly. So there are a few legislative or legal framework that as I mentioned in my previous discussion as well. Along with that, Bangladesh has adopted few soft law instrument by which different climate change issues or climate change issues are systematically faced, systematically protected, such as Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. It is one of the finest document, but the latest is this document remains backdated. We need to still we don't have the updated copy or something available publicly. So the climate change strategy and action plan should be more comprehensively undertaken by the policymakers, and also There are another important document, that means the standing order on disaster. This document is one of the practical document or the action document of the policymakers, that they take action immediately on the basis of any environmental issues or hazard. And they recently developed another strategy plan by which climate change related internal displacement are mentioned, uh, addressed in that policy document. So all this actually, some other documents are also I need to mention here. So despite all this legal arrangement, that means I want to mention that the document or the legal arrangement already we have, it is sufficient, or is how should I say that too many documents already developed, but there are remained coordination gap among different policy level or different institutions. Particularly, once we talk about climate justice, then climate justice issues should be mentioned in the particular policy document specifically. So still, specific or clear arrangement of climate justice under the policy arrangement is also lacking. But whatever legal or policy arrangement we have, it is sufficient in that sense that not too many policy. If we draft too many policy, then it would be challenge, one of the challenges to implement all those policies. Rather, comprehensive or systematic policy document is crucial in that case. So what are the last portion of my presentation is the major challenges to establishing climate justice in the legal system of Bangladesh. Based on the impression of my previous document, I identified few challenges. First of all, that there are so many gray areas in defining and addressing climate justice locally and internationally. And therefore, the definition, criteria, conceptual framework, and remedial measures of climate justice should be systematically defined and determined either from the existing policy document or through a new legal or policy arrangement. And also being one of the developing countries of the world, Bangladesh has limited ability to adapt. Bangladesh doesn't have uh, any significant capacity, and also Bangladesh still lacks different implementation measures are still lacking. So therefore, without international financial and technological support, more support, I say that Bangladesh will not be able to manage climate change related impact. Although Bangladesh is receiving continuous support from international organizations or international support, but whether those supports or financial issues are systematically maintained or not, that should be that is a big question, and an accountability mechanism should be developed here. Bangladesh as well as is one of the most Bangladesh as well as be one of the most vulnerable to climate change impacts. That means being one of the vulnerable areas, Bangladesh to ensure climate justice, its first phase is also one of the challenges, because we have others issues that is actually, that means initial violation of climate change should be protected first. Then climate justice in broader sense we need to address in general policy document. And also regional cooperation is important, uh, but we don't see any strong regional cooperation so far, and also sufficient fund, as I already mentioned that. And under the laws and limit principle is a big challenge, because it is in every conference of the parties agreement, the NGO, civil society, policy level, they always claim for more money or more support, but it still this is remains a international political decision. So creating a strong lobby is also very important, because you know that climate change is not only a issue that we discuss academically or policy level, rather it is a big political issue. So we need to create a strong lobby in both in national and international platforms, so that our advocacy group can play a crucial role at the time of international decision-making process. So actually, this is all about it's a brief discussion on the climate justice. I understand that many issues remains need to be addressed in that particular paper, and I'm still working. So hopefully, through the feedback of the distinguished panelists, I'll be able to improve further. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Awal Khan, for your in-depth presentation and thorough presentation. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Samsud Duha to discuss on the paper just presented by Professor Awal. Mr. Samsud Duha. So
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator and keynote speaker. It's a very comprehensive presentation from Awal Bhai, and it's a blending of not only focusing the UNFCCC's negotiation, but also national and international legislative structure, including the plans, policies, and what we could do in terms of, ensuring climate justice. When we talk about climate justice, there is the opposite word, climate injustice. So the very terminology of climate justice, as I understand, has been derived from the historical concern or obligation of climate injustice and also development injustice. We also can talk environmental injustice. But in the context of climate change, when we talk about injustice, then essentially that injustice is related to causing global warming. And we say that, the moderator also said that some countries are instigating global warming in an unnatural way, and some countries are facing impacts of those global warming. For instance, we are facing devastating cyclone, slow onset event, sudden onset event, and many events and impacts are linked to the violation of human rights. So the connection of injustice is not a plain way. It's a historical concern, and also how this climate change impact is causing another dimension of injustice in terms of human rights violation to the most climate change affected communities and people. But if I look into the UNFCCC and the framework that talked about addressing climate change, and the very fundamental concern of addressing climate change was mitigation, limiting greenhouse gas emissions so that we can avoid many impacts of climate change. But we found that we failed to go for robust action for emission reduction, not only the developed countries, but also the emerging developing countries. I am putting fingers to the emerging developing countries because emerging developing countries, though they are not historically responsible for climate crisis, but they also should follow a kind of green development path, so that the mistake that the developed countries did in past, the developing countries could avoid that mistake. But this has not happened. So there is a blame game between developed countries and advanced developing countries. Who will do what? Developing countries are saying that the historically responsible polluters should go for robust mitigation actions. On the other hand, they are asking for the developing countries to contribute also emission reduction. So the interplay of blame gaming or putting fingers between developing and developed countries, we are increasing the risk. We are facing the increased risk of climate change. And there is another concern. In the process of limiting global average temperature, we might face increased impact. So we need to adapt with those impacts. So that adaptation should be supported by finance and technology. But over the years, we failed to go for mitigation. We didn't get proper finance and technology mechanism for addressing or adapting to the impacts of climate change. And that led us to another dimension. This is loss and damage. And many countries, including Bangladesh, are facing increased volume or amount of loss and damage. And this is not only due to sudden onset event, but also slow onset event. many slow onset events are evident in many climate change hotspots. And those slow onset events and the residual impact of sudden onset events has a close connection to the violation of human rights. So this is a series of, violating human rights or violating the obligations of addressing climate change. But on the other hand, this is a global narrative of climate. Global narrative of climate justice. When we talk in the global perspective, we demand that the basic understanding of climate justice is go for robust mitigation action, is to provide finance and technology support to the developing countries to adapt to the impacts of climate change. But I understood that during my participation in the conference of the parties that the very argument of climate justice is just having money, having some resources from the developed countries and down to the developing countries for some adaptation actions. And when we talk about climate justice, we try to sell our victimhood, that we are victim, we are being increasingly victimized with the impacts of climate change, so we need money for adaptation. And for having support or for getting support from the global communities, we compromise our basic demand for emission reduction. Even very often we also compromise our basic demand of having, compensation for loss and damages. So my concern is that the demand for finance, finance-centric COP negotiation put many basic argument of climate justice behind. That's the pity for the developing countries. On the other hand, when we talk about more money for adaptation, we don't see the flow of adaptation money to the communities. They are being increasingly affected by the impacts of climate change. So the communities are at the forefront of climate change, forefront of climate impacts. They are getting less resources. For instance, in Bangladesh, the adaptation resources, whatever we got from the global communities and whatever we have mobilized from the national resources, for instance, Climate Change Trust Fund, most of the fund spent on infrastructure development. So infrastructure development is a kind of risk-centric adaptation measures. We want that we will reduce the risk of climate change impact. And for reducing risk of climate change impact, we investing on embankment, sluice gate, cyclone center. There is also a political economy around. If there is a infrastructure development concern, there is a concern of investing big money, and investing big money allows big corruption. So this is the political economy of climate change finance. So given that political economy, we often fail to ensure governance of spending. We often fail to comprehensively include the differentiated vulnerabilities that the coastal communities or the flood affected communities or a salinity affected women is facing in the context of climate change. So this is another dimension of climate injustice or justice, whatever we say, and we fail to address those. And there is no discussion at all in global level, also national level, to correct this injustice. And I should say that this is structured injustice, this is manifested injustice to the climate change affected communities, and that is being done by the national actors. If I consider the national, bureaucratic process or political leaders or experts, all are doing this together. So my concern is that when we talk about climate injustice, we should not only point finger to the international stakeholder. Developed countries also should raise our concern and question to the national policy stakeholder, whether they are taking appropriate plans, activities to address differentiated impacts of climate change in the climate affected communities, to the women, to the adolescent girls, and others. Yes, we have plans, we have NDC, but NDC is not sufficient. Not only from Bangladesh, but also all the NDCs are not aligned to limiting global average temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade goal. We developed NAP. Again, NAP is top-down exercise. Mainly, if I consider Bangladesh, this is top-down exercise. developed by a group of experts with the support of a strong bureaucratic process, and that NAP excluded again, differentiated vulnerabilities of climate change affected communities. And again, I should say that there is two different dimensions of climate change impact. One is risk focused dimension, another is human dimension of climate change impact. If I consider the human dimension, this is secondary and tertiary impact. This is linked to displacement and migration. This is linked to, vulnerability of women, health crisis, early marriage, that has close connection to humanitarian obligation. So the NAP also failed to capture that secondary and tertiary impacts of climate change. So we are just talking about some measures that are linked to DRR plus, not even focusing or forecasting the long-term impact of climate change. We are just addressing the recurrent impact of climate change through NAP and others, and we are failing to capture the long-term or projected impacts of climate change in the context of 2 degrees centigrade global warming scenario. Again, there are some gaps in addressing or ensuring climate justice. One gap is legal aspect. We cannot complain to the national authority if they fail to implement NAP. We cannot file a case against the international stakeholder if they don't provide money for addressing loss and damage. If we look into the loss and damage negotiation and the text of addressing loss and damage, it says that the countries will enjoy a kind of immunity if they fail to comply with the decision they made for addressing loss and damage. On the other hand, we cannot file any case to the national government if they fail implementing NAP. So given that legal loopholes of CAP, we cannot ensure justice, because ensuring justice should be supported by some legal obligations. We have some legal instrument at the global level, human rights instrument, but countries are not legally bound to implement those. Unless having a legally bind legal structure or legal papers, we cannot claim strongly for ensuring climate justice. So this is my plain analysis. You are, expert, and I know our wife since many years. He is a very, very good legal expert. So there might have some concern in relation to how we could make a connection with these national plans, NAP, NDC, loss and damage, to the legal obligations whether countries will be obliged to ensure implementation of these national plans, and ultimately ensuring climate justice, gender justice, and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Duabai, for your very interesting real-life experience, sharing with us real-life experiences, and having or adding some extra thoughts with Professor Awal's paper. Now, I would like if you have any question, I would like to invite the audiences. If you have any question, you can raise your hand, or you can put your question on chat box. And if not, then I have some questions for actually both for Professor Awal and also Duabai. If you don't mind, maybe do you have any question from the audiences? No, I don't see any question. So maybe I will, since just Duabai just finished his statement, maybe I can ask him first. Is there any question from anyone? No. Okay. Like Duabai, I know that you are working in the climate change field since years, and you have so many experiences at national and international level of dealing with diverse issues, especially technology issues, technology transfer issues. You are also involved with technology need assessment at the beginning. I remember once upon a time I also interviewed you about your experiences there. But if I now ask you, what are the current scenario of climate justice in Bangladesh as per your field level experiences? What you would like to share with us?
So I can share climate injustice, not justice, because if I consider global level, the actors and activists, we are very, privileged, or we took the global platform to talk about climate justice. There is no national narrative of climate justice, because the justice is framed by the very narrative of justice is framed by civil society. Civil societies has a kind of space in the global level to talk about justice, but there is no space in national level to talk about justice or to criticize injustices. In national level, if I talk about corruption, there is no space for me. If I talk about malgovernance, there is no space for me. Without ensuring proper utilization of climate change money, you cannot say that justice has been ensured. So the very concern of justice is not just providing money, it's just not developing a comprehensive plan, but also implement this plan in the climate change affected communities. This has not been happening in Bangladesh. But should we talk about that the political actors or maybe the repressive process doing injustice, or they are doing corruption, or we should ensure justice in many events? We cannot do it. We cannot say this, because there is no space for this in societies. On the other hand, there are experts, there are academicians. They don't talk about justice, because when they talk about justice, they consider that only the activists will talk about climate justice, not the academician. So the academician and the expert don't want to be an activist. So they consider being an activist is not that, is not that prestigious to them. And I talk to many academicians, many experts. They prefer to be introduce themselves as academician or researcher or expert. They prefer to work with the government machineries. They prefer to take advantage from the government projects and international projects, and they don't talk about justice, and they don't talk about corruption. They don't talk about governance. So the national narrative of climate justice that should be framed by the civil societies, by the actors, by the experts, this has not been happening in Bangladesh. I don't know about the other countries. This is very true for Bangladesh. So the absence of the narrative of climate justice by the civil societies, by the expert, by the academician, is instigating injustice to the communities, climate change affected communities. And what is the injustice? If you visit the coastal areas, you'll find many people still they live outside of the embankment. They don't have access to basic services, and they are in severe inhuman condition. If you go to the urban slum, there are many people who migrated from the coastal areas to the urban slum. They still faces, discriminated situation in the context of accessing to the justice. They don't have identity, because as displaced people, they don't have identity, and they don't have right to access to the government support, because they don't have identity card. There are many people in the urban area. They are termed as floating people. I don't know how they are termed as floating people, because they don't have any identity, and they are the climate change migrants, most of them. So the state is not responsive to address basic requirement or services to those excluded population, and they have been being excluded day by day. There are many concerns of illegal migration from Bangladesh to other countries, and they're migrating desperately, and government knows who are the traffickers, but there is no strong legal action against them. So this is increasing. So when we talk about climate justice, we should not only talk about the broader framework that we need money, and providing money is a kind of correcting injustice. We also should look into the local concern. We are doing injustice to the people who are in the climate change, who are living in the climate affected areas. The business communities in Bangladesh, they emit more, and they enjoy more facilities. They are doing injustice to the people who are living in the climate exposed areas. So my concern is that along with the international narrative of climate justice, we also should have a national narrative of climate justice. And this is essentially required. Otherwise, we cannot communicate the injustice of the climate change affected communities to the policy stakeholders. And again, civil societies should be given proper space, democratic space to speak out against corruption, to speak out against, malgovernance, and also maladaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhabai. Just it was very interesting observation from you. I just, as a supplementary question, I have something popped up into my mind. Like, what do you think? Like, what role civil society and NGOs can play to promote climate justice in Bangladesh?
In that case, civil society can capture the local level vulnerability, cases of injustice, and can communicate to the national and international policy stakeholders. And you know that civil society could play a submissive role, not a very, active or very aggressive role. So taking this in a very positive way, that they are the excluded people, they are the vulnerable people, so they are facing differentiated vulnerability by the impacts of climate change. So address those vulnerabilities. So a kind of soft, engagement with the policy stakeholder is important. That's why I often consider a strong bonding of civil societies, a platform of civil societies, so that civil society can have a broader policy position and can communicate concern of the grassroots people to the national policy stakeholders.
Thank you, Awal Bhai. Thank you, Doha Bhai. Now I would like to shift my focus to Professor Awal Khan, since I have few questions for him. First of all, like I must thank you for your fantastic presentation, but this is something I want to ask beyond your presentation. In general, what do you think, like what role academics can play in Bangladesh to promote climate justice? Or how can they play a role actually? What, in your opinion, it's like, what do you think actually? I just want to know.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Madhav. Basically, academic platform or in academic level, climate justice issues are really, it need to be more systematically addressed, both in academic research and as well as it policy exercise. And you know that climate justice topic or these issues should be incorporated in the curriculum at different level of university. And as it is one of the emerging issues, so both academic by including in the academic curriculum, and also there are different initiatives could be taken for academic exercise. And also, of course, academic research is one of the important issues. So we need to climate justice issues should be basically focused. And you know that there are different academic scholars. They are frequently are going to develop the conceptual and theoretical issues of climate justice. And also there are different challenges, these conceptual issues to be adjusted with the policy level. So how the gap between academia and the policy level that could be minimized, the academic institution must take initiative to minimize that gaps. And also, you know that not only in academic exercise, but also learners, that means students and participants, they should be engaged for that means there is also required that we need to educate our young generation so that they can understand, they can learn that what is actually climate justice or injustice, as Doha is particularly focusing that we need to more is that climate injustice is should be more addressed, because everywhere climate injustice issues are there, but we don't have any.
If I interrupt for like while you, Professor Awal, like we can see like there is a gap between academia and policy making everywhere in the world. Actually, it happens. We still we need to bridge it everywhere actually. But what do you think, like in Bangladesh, how much role really academics can play? Is there like from policy making level, do they have an initiative to bring academics closer, or is there an initiative from academics to bring policymakers closer so that they can work together? What is your opinion actually? What do you-
You know that these two different dimension, I would say, because academic and policymakers, they have connections, but this connection is not actually stronger enough. That means when any policy document is drafted, usually they heavily rely on the bureaucrats or those who are already engaged in drafting this kind of policies. Less academics are involved. I don't want to say that academics are not involved, but less involvement is there. So I would suggest or recommend that academic institutions, they should have strong connection with the ministries or policy bodies so that a regular consultation or relationship can be made. But there are some limitations, that beyond curriculum, sometimes academic or institutions, they don't have enough time to initiate different activities. But in that case, government should
who should take first initiative? Government
I
should?
mean that from both sides, but academic institution, they should either through their curriculum or their regular activities, they should design plans or programs that we need to create a lobby or connection with the policy institutions so that these issues are can be regularly maintained. And you know that in developed countries, you are living in Canada, your academic institutions are given highest priority. And in case of any policy intervention or in case of any policy analysis, they always seek comment from the scholars from
Yeah,
academic
in
institutions.
all developed countries it happens. Maybe that is why these are developed countries, or maybe this is a cause and effect. Actually, there is a cause and effect relation. If policymakers value knowledge and knowledge value policymakers, they do value each other. Maybe it helps to.
Yeah, kind of.
But what do you think? At the same time, I have a similar question, another similar question to you from your research and from your observation. What do you think? Like, what role private sector can play to promote climate justice in Bangladesh? Or do you see any possibility of building public-private partnership?
Yes, of course, public-private partnership should be much stronger. And you know that public institutions, they have different complex formalities or lengthy formalities by which any issues are taken to the public institutions, it takes longer. But private institutions, they have kind of flexibility. They have opportunity to engage with the people through the field, and also they through their different NGOs or civil society organizations, they have very flexible access to the vulnerable groups or the concerned people or stakeholders. So private organizations, they can play a very crucial role, as Dovai also mentioned that, and also there is no way that we can ignore private institutions. Even there there are individual communities we can sometimes see in a particular area, so their voice should be heard. That means they need to private organizations, through their research, through their fieldwork or any kind of academic activities, we need to reach to that group of people. So partnership as well as strong relationship with them, and identify different intellectual or academic issues. We need also to sometimes we need to engage in decision making process, both the vulnerable groups as well as relevant stakeholders, so that we can design a strong policy or advocacy document.
But again, the same question. From your point of view, who should take the first initiative, or like who should?
Well, there is a sayings um, in the Bengali maxim that বিড়ালের গড়ায় ঘন্টা কে
Who
বাঁধবে?
will build the cat?
So
Who will build the cat? That's what
হ্যাঁ,
you want to say. Yeah.
হ্যাঁ,
That's my question actually. Who will build the cat first? I mean, who will take the first initiative? Will
হুম, হুম।
public-private this partnership or academic policymakers partnership? Who should be more proactive here?
In that
In
case,
Bangladesh.
I would say that in that case, private organizations they can play the more stronger role because they can, as I mentioned earlier, that they have more flexibility than government organizations. So if the civil society voice is heard, or if they can reach the civil society voice to the concerned authority, then the breeze could be made. So in that case, individual or private organizations, they should take the first step. They should raise their voice, either virtual platform or practical platform. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Awal. From your discussion and also Dohabai's discussion, we find that we all suggested to make sure climate justice in Bangladesh is not only government, but also like we need active participation of academics, civil societies, public sectors, and both public and private sectors. And maybe it's not only government who is responsible to take the initiative. Like maybe academics themselves, private sectors, civil societies also can take initiative. And one interesting thing I find like from Duhabai's conversation that he thinks if we can address injustice, then we can make sure justice. So to make sure climate justice in Bangladesh, maybe like everywhere, we first need to make sure that there is no injustice or climate-related injustice happens or exists within the territory. So in that case, maybe government can be like more active and proactive to make sure this. I have just one last question to Professor Awal. Do you think like is there any country in the world or which countries in the world you think like are example for any country in terms of ensuring and promoting climate justice?
Well, many countries they are taking different initiatives, and also that to ensure climate justice, there are few issues we need to keep in our mind. That means technological improvement and also knowledge sharing and different issues. And many countries, including Bangladesh, they're putting forward their different steps. And I can mention that like Bhutan in our neighboring countries, they focus on they drafted different policy document, and also they ensured or they given priority climate change issues in their national gross uh, domestic product in program gross domestic product GDP. So this is one of the initiatives in our neighboring countries and other countries of the world, like in African countries like Rwanda, Uruguay, European countries. They are also taking different initiatives. So this is one of the good thing that we can see around the globe, that climate justice issues are systematically or gradually they are focusing. And Bangladesh, they need have more proactive, or they need to initiate further initiatives so that these issues are uh,
But yeah,
systematically.
thank you, Professor Awal. But at the same time, do you think Bangladesh has also made some remarkable progress in terms of climate change adaptation, both in adopting policy and also in implementing in the field? What is your opinion?
Yes, in terms of drafting policies, I would say that Bangladesh already has made a significant development. That means the initiatives or policy documents so far we have drafted, many countries of the world they could not draft. So it is one of the success of Bangladesh. But issue is drafting policies and implementing is two different issues. So implementation mechanism in terms of human rights protection or ensuring climate justice is lacking. So I don't think that new policies require more. Rather, we need to, whatever policies we have already in our hand, we need to look into that, how many actions plans could be taken viable actions plans, that means or feasible or time-bound action plans could be taken through the existing policies, and also there should have a accountable mechanism. That means accountability mechanism should also be there, because we don't know that what is the progress of all those initiatives, and all this information should also be publicly available. And in case of people aggrieved, they need to we need to hear from their uh, from them that what is their grievance or what sort of improvement they want. So this is very important, that people's voice should be heard from different levels, and it should be reached to the policy level as well.
Thank you so much, Professor Awal Khan. Now, like if any audience have any question, then you may raise hand, or you can just ask question directly to our speaker or to our keynote speaker. And if not, maybe we can conclude our session here. Before that, maybe everybody can turn on or camera or your camera so that you can take a picture. Like actually, is it Alfie, are you taking picture, or who will take?
No, I'm not taking picture. Maybe from iCAD they're taking picture. Mr. Nafis, are you taking picture?
Sir, let's turn on our camera first.
Yeah.
We will take the photo.
Okay.
It's like, is Dohabai missing here?
Doabai already left because he has other engagement.
Okay, fine. So maybe we can, once you are done with it. But before done, I would like to thank you everybody. Thank you all ICAD volunteers and staffs who supported us for making this. And thank you, Awal Bhai, for your fantastic presentation and also answer.
Thank you, Dr. Mata, for your nice coordination of this session. Yeah, and looking forward to further collaboration.
That's my pleasure.
Thank you, sir.